So Dean, good to do this again. We can see the footprint of the UFC PI and the overall success. I think we've got 7 fighters from China out of the last 16. I think Japan have got 4. So whatever you're doing over there with the team, it is clearly working.
We're definitely happy with the success we had in the first round and kind of coming together. We've spoken previously about how the challenges we had during the COVID and, with staffing and the impact of their training and getting them the appropriate fights and at the right level, to develop their career appropriately. Those sort of barriers have been lifted now, and we're at full strength staff-wise, both on the performance end as well as on the technical side as well. And it's really made a difference. And the guys are in phenomenal shape. And we had our last I had a last little talk with the guys before we left Shanghai to come to Las Vegas. When I was looking around at the circle and some of the guys that are in this Road to UFC tournament, they joined the academy at like 18, 19 years old. They've been with us for 5 years, and it kind of takes that long to develop. Like earlier on, we didn't have as much time with them and as much contact time, and particularly on the technical side, coaching now we have more coaches, so the athlete to coach ratio is more favourable, and we're getting that more time with them, and we're just seeing the impact it has to their development. So it's great, and I'm happy with how it's going, and I'm definitely process driven, and I feel like we're developing the processes the whole time, and that's moving in the right way, and then hopefully the results come off the back of that. But I'm not completely pinned to that, because sometimes that's outside of your control. We just got to do the best we can possibly do to prepare them. Dr. Duncan French has the overarching philosophy of the PI of IPOS, which is improving the probability of success. That's all we're trying to do. You can't always impact the direct outcome, but we're trying to improve the probability. So I feel like we've been doing that, and it's been a good year, and last year as well. So looking forward to more of that come this Friday, and into the final that's been announced in Macau.
Yeah, lovely. Well, I'm going to touch on a few of the things that you just said there, and I want to take this opportunity to point people in the direction of the Octagonside podcast that we did together, where you spoke more specifically about a lot of those things and some of the philosophies, strategies, etc. I will send people in that direction. But first, don't go anywhere. We've still got more to talk about on this Road to UFC that's coming up. The semi-finals that are taking place in Las Vegas. I'll be jumping on a plane to get over there to call the action. I couldn't let anyone else put their fingers on this one, Dean. I feel like
it's yours, mate.
Well, once you've been a part of something, and I truly love kind of the developmentals. I love grassroots MMA and everything in between. It's not all about kind of world titles and all that kind of stuff for me. I think some of the most beautiful stories happen when you're just discovering someone, which we have been doing with the Road to UFC. But just to give people who are perhaps new to the tournament a little bit about the sort of association with the UFC PI and of course the athletes, because we've jumped in and spoken about the Chinese athletes, but it's a very obvious reason. You're over in Shanghai, but how much or how little can you get involved in the athletes' preparation and then of course their actual fight and fight day?
The Chinese athletes?
Yes. Well, anyone that comes through the PI, but I think I'm right in saying like 95% of them are from China, right?
Yeah, at the moment it is. We have a couple of Indian athletes and a Singaporean athlete now as well, who you'll be seeing hopefully maybe next season's Road to UFC, depending on the weight categories that are chosen for that. But yeah, it is a challenging and interesting sort of arrangement. So yeah, we are developing them for the tournament and their fights, and we help them in terms of all the performance services like strength and conditioning, nutrition, sports science. I think I might have said strength and conditioning, and sports medicine to keep them on the mats. But then also there's the technical training. We have a full-time academy program there. Ultimately, when they get to the UFC, we still offer all of those performance service, just like we do here in Vegas and also now at the Mexico PI. But when it comes to the technical training, we don't do any of the targeted technical training with any UFC athletes. They're able to join in the academy training, but we don't do any individual game planning or anything like that. So we do that for the academy athletes, and we do like sparring analysis, game planning work. But when it comes to the cornering, we don't, because ultimately they're going to have to do that in the UFC anyway. And so we help them in the regional scene and those events. But when it comes to RTU, we're not allowed to corner them. Which that's obviously as a coach is like, you've prepared the cake and you've got it all ready, but then you can't put it in the oven to or get it out of the oven
Right.
to see how it's going to come out. So that's a hard part of it. But one of the we're trying to build a legacy in terms of the impact to MMA in China, and one aspect of that is coach development. So a big part of that is we're trying to upskill coaches from the regional gyms. So they, we recruit athletes from all over China, and then they come to the academy, and then they're on the scholarship. But they obviously have their home gym. So 6 weeks before the fight, we'll bring out one of their coaches, hopefully one of the people that are going to be cornering them, and then we include them in all of the stuff that we're doing in terms of game planning and cornering, and try to upskill them. And then in the immediate sense or the acute sense, that's going to be helping those athletes for the fight. But for a broader sense, in terms of legacy, they're going to be going back to their home gyms and then developing fighters that we can then recruit back to the academy. So it's like a loop that we're trying to do for the long term. Obviously, on the short term, I'd love to be the one in there cornering, but that's not what we're here to do. We need to develop more Chinese coaches in the long run. There'll be hopefully all Chinese coaches at the PI, and that would be in terms of Chinese MMA, that would be a great goal. So yeah, that's kind of how what our involvement looks like. And then when it comes to fight week, we're still here, and I'm managing their training load and the weight cut and stuff like that, and getting them ready for the fight. But it's a slightly strange setup that we have because of that, and one in the optics, but also the fairness to the other
Sure.
fighters on the tournament as well.
I'm going to go a little bit off track now from Road to UFC, but you've kind of had something that's really piqued my interest. And I think I knew about the coaching development from wherever the regional team might be coming in. But it's an interesting one as well. I've got a conversation coming out with Paul Reed, who occupies a similar space to you. He's a performance coach for like Paddy and Molly and a lot of and then the English Mixed Martial Arts Association. Sometimes getting buy-in for projects in our sport of mixed martial arts has a lot of resistance. There's a certain culture within combat sports. People have done things a certain way, and when you've got people shaking things up, it doesn't always go down so well. How has that been received from you guys? Because I imagine, as a martial artist, let me call myself an athlete, which I'm certainly not, but I have to look after my own future, and I would have probably seen the UFC PI come to town and gone, you know what, I really need some of that, probably all of it, but let's take some of that. Then when I've gone there, I've seen, I kind of want that technical training as well. But then I've got a coach who essentially has guided me to this point. How do I get him to come along and buy into it as well? Are you having those let me call it just maybe ego unfairly, but I think people will understand that term. Have you been noticing there are some of those elements which have made it more difficult for the athletes? And I guess
Yeah, I mean, in terms of my role as technical director at the Performance Institute, that's kind of why it's not just like head coach. Because I've got to, one of the things I've got to think about is building the relationships with those regional coaches and gyms, and think strategically about the development of MMA in China. So one part of that is that, and that's why involving them for starters, in terms of buy-in to the athletes, it wasn't day one that we had it. Of course, they wanted to be involved, and they knew that it was a pathway for them to develop and get to the UFC. I think the road to UFC has been a real an impact into that buy-in, because it's literally a direct pathway that was kind of developed for the Asian market, but obviously China and because there's the challenges of getting them to contenders and stuff. It was better for developing the Asian market. So when they can see that, and then being part of the academy, and people that have, come from the academy and then won the road to UFC, like Rongju and Isha, etc. Having that representation and seeing that obviously creates a better relationship. So we haven't had maybe with like one or two managers, there's been some differences in opinion in terms of, because we need to develop their careers as well. So choosing when they have fights, who they fight. There's definitely been a culture in China where they're not so worried about, having a long list. They want to take short notice fights, whether, too heavy or whatever, and they're having big weight cuts and things like that, or, early in their career fighting a guy with 20 fights. So, and I'm not saying you should be fighting tomato cans along the way, but it's the appropriate challenges at the appropriate time as you're developing, that you're getting the right enough challenges. You're going in some 50-50 fights, some fights we're the favourite, and it has to be appropriately managed. And I think some of the guys when we first joined didn't have that, and they had some crazy records, whereas now, in terms of not when I say crazy, I mean the record didn't represent them as a fighter. And you've seen some of our Chinese guys that have huge records, like 34 and like Shailan and people like that.
Early 20s.
Yeah, exactly. And so because that was they fought very often, and they didn't necessarily prepare as well as they should have. So having that involvement in their career development, that's probably more of a challenge than on the training side, because they know on the training side that they're getting the best they can possibly get in terms of the performance services, and on the technical side as well. We've got Mark Timms now from City Kickboxing, is one of the striking coaches from there. He's had a huge impact on the program. Alberto Mina, former UFC fighter, had a huge impact on the jiu-jitsu, and so we're building out on the technical side, our coaching as well. And so that side of it, we haven't really had many challenges, and I think they've been very open. It's more on the career development, taking the right fights at the right time, thinking long term rather in the immediate about the fight that they want to have then, and thinking about getting the right. And also fighters as well. They have the attitude, I'll fight anyone, but that isn't always the best option. So that's where we've had the challenges, and I've tried to manage that as best I can. And it's an ongoing thing, but it's been working well. We've got some guys with unbeaten records now, or very good records, like 12-1, things like that the matchmakers are looking for. That's the type of records they want for contenders or road to UFC. And you'll start to see that now. And like this season, you see like Amasinger and people like that who have really good records. And so that's probably the biggest challenge we've had.
So without getting into specifics, I think that might be a little bit unfair for you to do, but I am interested in a couple of the athletes that we might be seeing, or we will be seeing this week, who have really turned things around. What I mean by that is, I know that you have seen some of these athletes, and you've got the combine system, and they maybe come in at haven't looked very good when they've first come through the doors to you, but now they're in this position where they're in the semi-finals of the road to UFC. They're 2 fights away from a contract. Have you got 1 or 2 examples of those athletes that people that are listening might be able to go and keep tabs on?
I think that's probably a little bit maybe not the way we look at it in terms of coming in and not looking good. They always come in. The reason we select them is because they have potential. It's just they're a little bit green, and they don't maybe have the tactical side, and we definitely see something in them for the potential. The only reason we'll bring them into the academy if we think they can make it to the UFC. That's like the first on the list of criteria is that do we see this guy having potential to make it to the UFC? If not, we don't need them in the academy. And if we don't see them with that potential, we actually have a tier for training partners. We think, all right, this guy's not going to make it to the UFC, but he's a good level, going to be a good training partner. We have a training partner sort of tier, and for the people that we do have to see the potential, there are the tier A, B, and C, and it's more in relation to how far they are away from the UFC, not necessarily how good they are. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
A little bit of a distinction there.
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying.
But to that point, though, in terms of that development, like Darmisi would definitely be one. In terms of a success story, came in at 18 as a tier C, came in at 2-0. I think now he's. I don't know, maybe he was like 1-0 when he came. Yeah, he was 1-0, and I think he's 9. I don't know his record off the top of my head. I think like 9-1. But he had a good development along all the fights with us effectively because he came in at 1-0. Had that loss in the semi-final of last season's RTU, and you never know how a fighter's going to respond to that first loss, and he just had the sort of the perfect response in terms of seeing it as motivating. Learnt from it. Learnt from I think he had all prior to that had all first round submissions. Sorry, not first submissions. First round stoppages.
Yes,
and then went to a fight where he probably could have finished him in the first round as it would normally go, but the guy was tough. He was fighting at a higher level. You can't finish everyone. And then when he went to the second round, tried again and couldn't. And I think he got to the third and mentally didn't, it wasn't necessarily a gassing thing. It was just like, I can't put this guy away. I thought I was going to, put the guy away. And, I told him before, when we go through the game plan, I told him before the fight, this might not be a guy that you can finish. You've got to be prepared for 3 rounds. He's a tough guy. He was like, I'm going to finish him in the first round. And in that moment, I'm not going to push down someone's confidence. They're saying they're going to finish. I've framed it in a way, in a positive light. But at the same time, if they're coming back with that with me, then okay. And then sometimes that's a lesson that you can only learn yourself. And he did. And in the first opening round in Shanghai, he fought the Japanese guy and he dropped in the first round. And he had a tough fight. And you see the way he paced himself. Way better. He showed a lot of composure, and I was really happy how he bounced back in that fight. He had a fight in between the semi-final and a couple of fights in between, and he's matured now. He's now 23. He's had that experience, and that's not all experience is positive experience. It's how you respond to it and what you learn from it. And I feel that he's developed in that way. So he's a real success story of the academy in that sense. Of like at 18 years old, joining as a Tier C. Going through having a knock, come back and building. We're developing on that, working on the mental side, and then going into this tournament where he's really confident now. 2 fights away from a UFC contract, which is that's basically what we're here to do. So he's definitely one for sure.
Another person that you spoke about was Wang Kong. We on the podcast that I referred to earlier. You said you got to watch out for this lady. She got her contract. Yeah, and I believe she's making her debut this week
on Saturday. Yeah, she's making her debut on Saturday. Yeah,
not at the road to UFC, but we got a fight night in Vegas as well. She'll be making her official UFC debut. That's got to be really exciting for someone like you who's been helping her with that transition to MMA from kickboxing.
Yeah, I can't wait, mate. She's such a phenomenal athlete. Such a pleasure to work with in terms of her attitude and stuff. Consummate professional. Hardworking, looks after her body, in terms of recovery and stuff, just smart. And in terms of her level, this fight camp, she had to do, she has to do most of her sparring with men, almost all of it, because the only other person that can really spar with her in the gym from the women is Yan Chi Wei. But Yan Chi Wei is fighting on Friday, and she's fighting a southpaw, so it didn't make sense for them to be sparring with each other. So she did all her sparring 90% with men, and when she goes with women, it's basically like a round off for her. So the level that she's at and the speed that she's taken on the grappling and the wrestling, she's 4-0 with 2 submissions, which is pretty crazy for someone that's a world champion kickboxer. But I have had that conversation with us. I don't forget what got you to the dance. Don't forget what got you here. You're not here to prove anything. You're here to win. So go in there and fight to your best attributes. And sometimes I feel she's like, no, I want to show people I can grapple. I want to show people. I was like, that's not what this is about. Go in there and dominate and show the elite level that you are at striking, and do your thing. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. That's been a real. That's like a different end of the spectrum. She's been like a special project because, the level that she came in at, we gave her specialised attention, and she was having one-on-ones. She was in the group sessions in the day, but in the afternoon it was always just one-on-ones with the specific technical coaches. And then the acceleration she had through that of getting that sort of attention, which for those special athletes and the stage of their career, because she was I think 29 when she joined us, and we felt that we needed to do that, and because there was a little bit of time against us, but it's paid off, and I'm looking forward to her. Having that debut, and it's just I don't think the UFC even planned this. I'm not sure whether they did or not, but Shevchenko and Grasso are the coaches of the Ultimate Fighter, so Shevchenko is going to be there watching her make her debut, and it's a great opportunity for her to be like in the crowd to say something to Shevchenko about I'm coming for you, because she is. That's been her goal. The first day she walked into the gym, when I said what's your goal, she said I want to beat Shevchenko in MMA. Like I did in kickboxing, and take the belt from her. So she's definitely rooting for Shevchenko in the rematch against Grasso.
Yeah, nice one. Dean, thank you very much for encapsulating some of the work that you've been doing. Big weekend for the Chinese fighters. Wishing everyone all the best of skill.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. Good to chat with you.